Welcome to the Robezoid channel. I'm your host, Mark. To all my returnees, welcome back. Thank you for your support. To all the new notices to the channel, welcome to the channel. Hope you stick around. Today's test drive is on the brand of Guerlain and their discontinued, well, I would say their disbanded line called Le Désert d'Orient collection. Now that collection has been moved around a bit. Some were discontinued, some were repackaged and thrown into another collection. This particular release was, air quotes, discontinued. This one called Rose Nacrée du Désert. So this is the spicy rose of the collection. And when I say, I hate saying discontinued, I hate saying it, it's something that you must be sure if you are on this platform. It wouldn't surprise me if this is available at the Guerlain boutique in Paris, where you can make your own bottles and utilize some of the juices that they have there. So I'm not going to say it's discontinued. It's very hard to find, especially if you're trying to find it in this bottle. It's not available in this bottle anymore. Now, I don't know why they would discontinue this thing. I remember, and faintly, but I remember when this first came out, this collection, and the Rose Nacrée was probably one of the hardest ones to find. I feel it had a limited release to certain places in the world, not available globally. If I recall, I might be wrong on that, but I don't think it was a popular release, and I don't think it's sold very well, unfortunately. So that's probably why it was axed or not repackaged and put into another line. Now this one, I was curious because it was the, I would say, the dark sheep of the collection. I just wanted to see how popular it was on the tube. It wasn't really popular on the tube at all. It has I did a quick search and it was reviewed like just a small handful of times back like several years ago. So there's nothing new on this release. I relish doing videos like this from fragrances from the past. And this is not a deep past. This is not a fragrance from the 60s or 70s, but it is something from, you know, my journey in YouTube. This thing got released during my journey on YouTube. So I love kind of giving a revamped video on the tube for someone that is interested in this release. So I look forward to sharing my thoughts on the Rose Nacrée. I have put in extreme, for me, this is an extreme dent in this bottle here, especially since it's something that I got recently, and I'm saying recently, you know, 3-4 years ago. But I can't wait to delve into it. Before we get into that, I did want to thank my sponsor of the day, FragranceX.com. I wanted to thank them for this bottle. Obviously, you can't get this particular release on their website. However, you can check out a bunch of Guerlain releases on their site. Check out FragranceX. Support me by utilizing my coupon code on their website. It is my channel name, Robezoid, and you receive 15% off on your purchase. It doesn't have to be a mega purchase, small, big, doesn't matter. You're helping me out. And for that, merci beaucoup. Let's get to delving into Rose Nacrée. Now let's go under the hood. Let's take a look at some stats on this one. Release date was back in 2012. The nose behind this, of course, the in-house perfumier, Thierry Wasser. The major notes to my nose. When you look at the note breakdown of Rose Nacrée, you can see the familiar combo of rose oud saffron. So you're already thinking this is going to be a Middle East release that Guerlain is trying to, you know, tackle, you know, that section of the world with these releases. And you're seeing a familiar note breakdown here of 3 notes that we're all too familiar of, and that kind of scares, you know, experienced frag heads like myself, just because we've seen this before, we smelt this before. But from a storied fragrance house like this, and I hate saying this, but there's a lot of snobs here that are saying, oh, Guerlain is, you know, a rich French house. What are they doing releasing these type of fragrances? It's below their standards. You know, poo-poo on you. I'd like to see a prestige French fragrance house delving into different types of areas of fragrances. So especially with Wasser at the wheel, I want to see what he can do with this particular release, and he did an excellent job with this particular release. Now, the major notes to this one, obviously rose is in the name. It is rose based. Saffron is a major note also. I like that melange. You'll see that oud is not in this major note breakdown for me. Patchouli is the third wheel for me. Actually, it's not the third wheel, but it is, you know, third wheel in this major note breakdown. Those are the three major notes. But patchouli is very much ingrained in the Rose Nacrée. Now let's delve into this release. It is my scent of the day today, but I want to remind myself of the introduction. So I'm going to spray the back of my hand here just to remind me while I basically, you know, dissect this thing. And wow, the opening of Rose Nacrée, it starts off with a big, bold rose with a spicy nuance. So it goes into the, you know, dare I say, the Rose 31 of Le Labo territory, where you get a spicy rose, that the spices really engulf the rose, but it is a very big rose, a big punching rose. They're both, these two ideas of rose and spices are up front and center. That's all you're really getting. There are some things that are going to peel back, and of course you're going to see more of, but saffron and rose are your major players here. They're equally huge pieces in this opening that make it really interesting. They're both equally beautiful in their own right. Once you start, you know, living with this release like I did with a test drive, you live with it. You really, when I test a fragrance for a test drive, I am analyzing this fragrance for several days on my skin and seeing what the nuances are. Now, when you're talking about a rose oud saffron release, usually in these releases, it's either the rose that's dominant or the oud that's dominant, and then the other one just backs it up. Here, it seems like the rose is dominant for obvious reasons because of the name, but saffron is the one backing it, with the oud kind of being the third wheel in this release, almost being forgotten in this release. The rose and the saffron are both gorgeous. As far as ouds go, this is a very, dare I say, kind of like a plain oud, very westernized oud. It really isn't, it doesn't have much bite to it. It doesn't have a major facet in this release. It really is emphasizing the rose and the saffron. The saffron itself is very spicy. It's rich in the scent. Even though it's a primary note up top, it settles down to a secondary note more into the mid. The saffron actually also shows its leathery nuances in the mid of this release, which is a really nice touch. It immediately made me think of something that I just recently tested on my channel, which was Notorious Oud by DS and Durga. In that release, the saffron was the star of the show. The saffron in this release is just as good as the saffron in that release and in Notorious Oud, which was excellent. I felt like the saffron in there was mwah, bravo. It's a huge compliment to either DS and Durga or Guerlain, depending on where you are. But the saffron in this is as good as that one. An absolutely beautiful, I say, primary slash secondary note in this release. Now the rose, the primary note in this release, it is going to be all throughout the release. It will be for the rest of the life of it. Is absolutely beautiful. It's giving itself a at times it fools me a bit, but it is a damp rose. The bulk of the life of this fragrance, the rose smell like damp rose petals to me, with some green nuances, which rose does in a lot of fragrances. It's very natural. It's very well done in this scent. It is the star of the show. Some parts of this release, the rose kind of morphs into almost a jammy rose. It felt a little sweetened. I'm not saying that it's the rose that gives you the sweetness in this release, but it does feel jammy in some parts of the release. And in other parts, it felt like a very dry rose. And that's a lot of kudos to the secondary notes in this release, because it really dries out that dampness of the rose petals. Other times, of course, most of the time, very dewy, green. But at the end of the day, the rose is the star of the show in this release, and it does tons of things on your skin. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now, one of the major factors in this release is the patchouli. It's almost kind of hidden because everybody's talking about the spicy kick and the rosy kick, but the patchouli here gives its familiar green nuances here, and honestly takes over as second in command, more into the heart. and takes over where the saffron kind of left off. The patchouli will be the big secondary note until the end of the scent. You can say this is a patchouli rose-based scent, as they both can go hand in hand in the Rose Nacrée until the end. Cardamom plays a minor role here and plays well with the spicy saffron, but does get lost within the whole composition more into the mid. So you're not going to see lots of cardamom here, but a little bit of it into the start of the fragrance. Oud, as the third wheel of the big three combo, isn't big, it's not prominent, and I feel it's just a backer for the scent, giving its familiar dustiness, some light woodiness, but it's not overly woody. When the saffron kind of goes down a notch or two and the patchouli amps up, the oud plays a little bit more of a role. It just makes this rose-based scent much darker than I thought I'd be getting, especially up top. I love how the rose is the brightness in this very, very dark scent once it starts getting into the patchouli slash oud type of ending to this release. So into the dry down of Rose Nacrée, it shows less bite from the opening. Obviously you get less spices here. The spices really tone down quite a bit, but you get more of the same rose, patchouli as your big players. They go ahead into the dry down of this release with some dustiness from the oud. There's something that was really interesting in this release is that there was a mild balsamic oily quality throughout, and I felt much of that within the first few sniffs, but it's much more prominent in the back end of the fragrance. It gives the rose almost an oily quality here, which is really interesting, and it gives you an air of interest in this release that makes it a little more different. This resinous quality could come from the benzoin in this release, but mostly the benzoin gives this scent some sweetness, and that sweetness, it's much more felt into the back end of this release. To note, there's a little powdery aspect touches that go in and out of this scent, which is why I want to mention it. It's not a mainstay in this release. Like, I don't feel it all the way through, but it feels like it shows up at some points in this release, especially when I was wearing it when it was a little warmer outside. So it's just something to take upon when you are sniffing this release. So overall, Rose Nacrée is done wonderfully, and you need to applaud the nose for such a creation. The Rose Nacrée is one of the most underrated Guerlains in my collection, I feel, and within the fragrance community. It just goes to show you, if you go on YouTube, you'll hardly find any fragrance reviews on this creation. The oud rose saffron combo is very much overdone. It's not even funny anymore, but there's a scent once in a while that just does it so well that you can't ignore it. This is one of those, so I'm giving it its flowers. You don't need a million of these in your collection, but I find it quite unique that the saffron and rose aspects are the main players in this release, while the oud is the third wheel. You don't see that often. It's well composed, and for that it gets points from me. It is an absolutely gorgeous release that I'm happy to have in my collection. Now let's get into seasons, day, night, versatility, and performance. I feel the best seasons for this, the main season for this would be fall for me. Spring nights works really well, especially those cooler spring nights. Obviously the winter is a good season for this. Day or night, I feel like nighttime is best for the Rose Nacrée. Versatility is fairly average. There's, you know, it's depending on your palate, but I feel like the versatility is fairly average on this one. Performance, this is a big plus for this release, and with Guerlain, it's always a crapshoot as far as performance goes. You got some that perform really well, some don't. This one is right up there. It's probably one of the best performing Guerlains that I have in my collection. Longevity is 9 to 12 plus hours. All wearings. Projection is very heavy. So you are getting your money's worth as far as performance goes. This is an excellent, excellent performer. So my final thoughts on Rose Nacrée before it goes into the vault for a full-fledged review. Nacrée is nothing new to Middle Eastern perfumery, but it is very well done. Amplifying the rose note with the darker notes, pushing it forward to your nose is a great trick. I always feel like the rose was primary in this release, never shying away from the bigger notes. There was a big bold patchouli here, and I feel like that was the X factor here. Not thinking it was going to be a big player, but it was. And it makes the whole concept of a rosewood saffron combo change drastically. Even the benzoin in the back end of this release changed the whole thing. I love the benzoin addition. Some may not like that, just because there's some sweetness in there in the back end, but I liked it. Even though the oud is faint and very faint, and it's not nothing, you know, I can't put this in one of my top ouds of all time. But it plays its part in this release too. There's some great transitions here. It's well composed, and at the end of the day, you just have to say bravo. An excellent release from the House of Guerlain. Unfortunately, harder to find, but Rose Nacrée, an excellent release, well blended. So now I'm done with Rose Nacrée du Désert. It's time for you to hit us up in the comments below. I know a lot of you may not have smelt this one, but if you have, please comment below. Let us know what you think of this release. I'm looking forward to reading those comments. And at the end of the day, a great port fragrance will make a lasting impression. Choose your scent wisely. Thanks for watching, YouTube. Have a good one.